Hey Jeff Adventures, Terry King here. Welcome to the channel and welcome to another build video on the FJ45 restoration. So as you can see, I've got the frame completely stripped down. The diffs are just sitting here. The frame itself is up on some horses and I'm just waiting for the mobile blaster to come to blast the chassis so that I can spray it and then start the reassembly process. So in the meantime, I've got a couple of little bits and pieces that I want to restore, and let's have a look at one of them right now. So what is this unit? I think it's called a steering idler arm or something like that. Anyway, that mounts up in the chassis and your steering linkages mount to it. That little sucker I am going to rebuild in this video. Now I'm not sure whether it actually needs rebuilding. I don't really know how to tell. It seems pretty tight, but hey, when I've got an LSA fitted to the car and 600 plus horsepower, I don't want to take any chances with any steering componentry. So I've got myself a Japanese Fuji rebuild kit, and let's see what we've got inside this thing. And that's what you get in the kit. It really is quite comprehensive. I don't think I'm going to be reusing too much of this at all. Perhaps that Zerk fitting, and obviously the arm itself, but the rest of it looks like it's contained here in the kit. I've never actually rebuilt one of these before. In fact, I've never even had one apart, so this will be a little bit of a learning journey for me as I go. And I've got a new toy, and let me show you what that is. So check this out, a blast cabinet. I've wanted one of these for a long time, and now I finally got one. So parts like that idler arm, I should be able to restore that back to new condition and save myself the pain of little bits of wire wheel flying off the wheel and embedding into my cheek. So I think I'll blast this thing first before I disassemble it. The logic behind there, I guess, is to prevent any crap from falling inside of it. Let's give it a crack. Plus the fact that I got a new blast cabinet and I want to use the bloody thing. So I assembled this a couple of days ago, and I bought with it a bag of garnet, 25 kilo bag of garnet. We'll open that up and tip it in. Well, that's pretty cool. Check that out. I think I got a new favorite toy. All right, let's disassemble this puppy. Okay, normally I would mark this arm against the spindle, but because it rotates in 360 degrees, it doesn't matter how I clock it, so I can just take it off. And I'm sure this will be a bugger. So I'll use a handy dandy gear puller. Okay, come on, baby. Brake for me. Oh, it broke. It come off. Amazing. That never happens for me. All right, got a seal, which is already popped out. Crusty. In the bin. That must be a locking nut, and that must lock that down. So let's take him out first. I got an imperial socket on a metric nut, but I don't care because that nut is going to be replaced. Big ass shifter time. I might actually measure that distance, just so I can get a guess at where the preload's going to go on the next one. And that's just about perfect. So we'll lock that down, mark that with a pen, and I'll count the turns. 5. Call it 5. Okay, now I've got to remember the sequence here. Cap, washer, next cap, spring. Now I'll pop that out from underside. It's a bit crusty. And the only thing I've got left to get out is that brass bush in there. Now that brass bush looks like it's been punched over in where that Zerk fitting is. So I think if I pry that out, I should be able to drive that bush out from the bottom side. Yep, I can see it wanting to move already. So let's get it from the underside. Oh, easy peasy. There we go. Okay, so I got the arm and the housing all cleaned up. I'm ready to reassemble this thing. Amazingly, the only thing that you actually use off the original Toyota is the housing itself. Everything else comes in the kit. Oh no, sorry, you don't get your Zerk fitting either. Bugger. Alright, I'm going to simply put this together in the reverse order of how I pulled it apart. I don't know whether that's what you're meant to do or not, but that's what I'm going to do. So I'll lay a bit of grease in there first, even though that arm doesn't actually run on that surface. If it ever got water past that seal, and the water got in between this housing and that bronze bush, I'd imagine it would be carnage. Okay, there's our bronze bush. Put a light smear of grease on that. Pop him in with that detent tab towards the Zerk fitting, because that's how I pulled it out. Okay, let me tap him down a little. Now, that was bent inside that Zerk fitting. So, I will do the same. Just like that. Next item was the shaft. So, clean that up. And I'll actually fill that up with grease as well. I don't know why, just because. Because it's a hole and it needs some grease. Now, we'll grease this shaft. The outside of it, and I'll grease there where I think the seal will run, and I'll grease the inside of this as well. Alrighty, drop that in. Oh, very nice. Now the spring was next, and I've got a spring here, brand new out of the kit. You know what? Before I go too far, I think that seal needs to go in first. And I'll show you why. Take that out of there. Flip that over. Now the reason I think we knocked that seal in first is that that shaft sticks proud of this. And when that shaft's sticking proud, it'll be more difficult to knock that seal in. So I'll put a bit of grease on the inside of it and a tiny little bit on the outside. Alright, that seal is seated. Now we'll grab that shaft that we had greased up, drop him back in. Yeah, that's better. I think it would have been too difficult to knock that seal in when that shaft was sitting proud. Okay, the next piece was this plate, and I'm assuming that little detent sits where that Zerk fitting was. Give that a light little smearing of grease. That looks like it's going to be fun and games to start that little sucker. A bit of grease on those threads to give myself a fighting chance to get them started. Yeah, this is fun and games. This is. Gotta find that sweet spot where it wants to start. Okay, let's take that guy out of there and see if we can start this without it first. Starts beautifully. Right there is where it wants to bite. I got it. Whew. That is not fun. Not fun at all. Now, no doubt there's a torque specification on that, which will be a function of how difficult or easy it is to turn the arm. I will start with my height adjustment. I actually measured it from over here, didn't I? See if we run this bolt down. I can actually see that's not lined up. So I'm going to back that off. That'll allow me to move that. That's got it. Now we'll go back to tightening that up. Let's pop our arm on there and see how tight that is. This is a taper, so it can only go on one way. Can't get it on that way. That feels way too tight to me. That's better. We'll take that. Okay, we'll pump this sucker with a bit of grease. And I'm starting to get resistance there. So we'll call it quits. Why don't these Zerk fittings let go? Beautiful. Call that a win. Now before I tighten that arm on with the nut, I'll paint both of these units independent of one another and then reassemble them. Next up, I'm gonna paint this with Pour 15, this rust preventative paint. This stuff is absolutely brilliant for pieces like this. I used it on my 57 Chev in this restoration and I loved it. The trick, however, when you open up the can, apparently the moisture in the air activates this stuff and sets it off. So I actually leave the lid on it and I put a tiny little hole in the side of it with a tech screw, and I just use that to meter out my paint, and then I put my tech screw back in there, and that can's, I don't know, that's probably a year or two old now, and it's still as good as the day I got it. And a little bit of this stuff goes a long ways. You paint it on and it hardens. It almost gets a consistency of like powder coating. It just fills in all the little cracks everywhere. It's absolutely brilliant. I rate it. Well, it's 24 hours later. Pour 15 is dried. I put 2 coats down. Came up beautifully. So the only thing left to do, pop that back on there, run our new nut down that came in the kit. There we have it. Completely rebuilt, greased up, ready to be installed back on the car. Beautiful. And through the magic of fancy editing, what we've got in front of us is a completely blasted and painted chassis, and we're ready to mount this right back where it belongs. Beautiful. All locked down into place. Looks fantastic. Well, there we go. There's something I've learned. How to build one of these steering idler boxes. Never done that before. Thanks for watching, everybody. Keep the shiny side up. We'll see you on the next build video. Bye now.